This podcast is brought to you by Flipper, a marketplace to buy and sell websites, stores, and digital real estate. Plot your own path. Become a boss by buying a small online business at Flipper. Simply visit flipper.com/techtalks for a free consultation and 50% off fees. That's FLIPPA, flipper.com/techtalks. If you do visit, let me know how you get on. But now, let's get the show started.
Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day I try to get a different guest onto this daily show that will deliver value and talk about real-world issues and how to leverage technology to solve those problems and challenges and turn them into opportunities. But of course, I'm also conscious that sometimes it's technology itself that is the bad guy. So for those reasons, today I wanted to explore the topic of ransomware. And here in 2020, we've already seen a huge number of high-profile ransomware attacks against hospitals, state, municipal and government agencies and organisations. And that includes Los Angeles County, Fort Worth Independent School District in Texas, ExecuPharm, Boston Children's Hospital, and so many more. And malicious hackers will continue searching for their next target, and ransoms will continue to be paid unless we do something differently. And I think many fail to realise that there are strategies out there for combating ransomware attacks which will ensure that a ransom doesn't need to be paid, regardless of the severity of the attack. So today I've invited Steve Grewal onto the podcast, who is the CTO Federal for data management company Cohesity, and he's working with government agencies to address cybersecurity issues, specifically the growing number of ransomware attacks. So he seems perfectly primed to talk about this topic. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to the east coast of the US, where Steve is waiting to speak with us now. And the best thing about me beaming your ears to the other side of the world, of course, is that face coverings are not required. So let's get Steve onto the show now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Steve Grewal. I serve as the Federal Chief Technology Officer for a company called Cohesity. And Cohesity's mission really is to redefine data management, both in this hybrid multi-cloud world that we live in today, but also that is applicable for your overall kind of data management lifecycle, which spans across all of your environments, not just the cloud, but on-premise, as well as your robo or edge sites. And as the federal CTO, I cover the entire federal portfolio, which includes the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, as well as civilian agencies. And I've been with the company for over 2.5 years.
And I'm really looking forward to finding out more about Cohesity in a moment. But before I do, I always like to try and find out a little bit more about the guests and how they got where they are today. And when I was doing a bit of research on you, one thing that immediately stood out was your unique background, because you were the former CISO, CTO, and CIO for the US Department of Education. So I'm curious, have you seen technology, or should I say, how have you seen technology impact education in your career, and indeed attitudes towards tech in education?
Yeah, I think technology has played an instrumental role in really transforming education. I mean, we're now in this COVID, scenario and COVID climate, so we really are experiencing some of those innovations firsthand. But if we think about technology from an access, collaboration and delivery perspective, I think technology has completely transformed all of that. We've moved from, kind of a fixed environment to more of a self-paced environment. We have the ability to collaborate across, geographical boundaries outside of the classroom. And then just the tooling and the wealth of information and the wealth of knowledge that's out there that we can take advantage of via technology for curriculum I think has changed the entire experience in a positive way. I think COVID in particular is really helping put that into perspective for folks who didn't have that exposure on how it has the delivery models and the consumption models for education have changed.
And here in 2020, of course, you're now the CTO at Federal for data management company Cohesity. But can you tell me more about the story behind that move and how you're now working with government agencies to address cybersecurity issues? Because it's an incredibly exciting place to be at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I got, I've been in the business for over 20 years. I got started in the private sector during the late 90s, during the dot-com boom, and had the pleasure of working for a series of tech companies, startups at the time, and was able to really learn a lot, meet a lot of good folks. And then in the early 2000s, I had transitioned into government contracting. I became a government contractor working for the Department of Transportation. During my tenure there at the Department of Transportation, a few years into that as a contractor, I came across an opportunity to actually become a federal employee, and which was very compelling. And I decided to compete for that, and I was accepted for that. And since then, my federal government career and my journey lasted over 15 years across 4 agencies: the Department of Transportation, Health and Human Services, Department of Education, as you mentioned, and finally the General Services Administration. So, had a great run in the government. Was really able to work on everything from vision, strategy, execution. Really, dealing with issues firsthand around technology, around operations and service delivery at a large scale. But then also working through some of the real hard problems around modernization and how do we start to turn the ship, whether, for the overall IT portfolio, whether that was the cloud, whether it was cybersecurity, and what have you. I was, I would consider myself as more of a hands-on executive, so was, fairly engaged in my last role at the GSA as deputy CIO. And as I was performing market research and looking for innovative technologies, my first course of action was to look at what we call primary hyperconverged solutions. If you think about the Nutanixes of the world, and perform some market research and mapped out an architecture. And then I started to look at what we call secondary storage or secondary hyperconverged solutions. And that's how I had come across Cohesity and other companies also in that ecosystem. And, being in government, being a government executive, I was, very understood kind of the technical and financial challenges that CIOs and CTOs were facing. So I was very impressed with the work that Cohesity was doing to help solve some of those problems, achieve some of those efficiencies, again, both technical, financial as well, and had a chance to learn about the company, meet the leadership, and was presented with an opportunity. It was a very tough decision, but still had the option to come in and have an impact and continue helping the government move in the right direction. So I decided to do so. Cybersecurity remains near and dear to my heart. I mean, as you mentioned, I had served as a CISO at the Department of Education and also closely worked on cyber initiatives. So, the cybersecurity paradigm has matured and changed a lot over the last 2 decades. But, I think as we think about competitive differentiation, as we think about national security, as we think about critical infrastructure, cybersecurity is baked into almost everything we do. So having a sound cybersecurity, strategy, architecture, processes, skill sets, all of that is incredibly relevant in the world we live in today.
And just to help people listening all over the world understand the scale of the problem that we're talking about today, could I ask that you set the scene and tell them a little bit more about the scale of ransomware attacks that we have seen this year alone? And it's not just isolated to one particular industry, it's multiple industries, isn't it?
Yes, industries, verticals. We've seen very high-profile ransomware attacks, this year. Honda, for example, many large federal agencies, international governments, pharmaceutical, manufacturing, financial services, you name it. We've seen a series of high-profile ransomware attacks, that are impacting these large institutions, these large organizations, and in some cases really, kind of bringing them to a screeching halt in terms of their mission and their business. So incredibly critical, incredibly important to keep an eye on the ball in relation to overall incidents and overall threat vectors, but just the recent proliferation of ransomware attacks in particular, and the impact they are having in almost in every aspect of our economy.
And one of the subjects that really fascinates me is a lot of people will be a victim, or businesses become a victim of ransomware and immediately think there are no options but to pay. And many fail to realize that there are strategies for combating ransomware attacks, which ensure that a ransom never needs to be paid, regardless of the severity of the attack. But is that something you can expand on for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we think about ransomware, we think about the kind of the overall strategy for ransomware. Everything from prevention, detection, and recovery. Yes, a lot of organizations, I think their immediate reaction just out of panic is to pay some of these adversaries. But I think if, having a sound data protection strategy is absolutely critical. By that, I mean making sure that you have the right tooling and the right architecture for having backups that can help you restore to a known good point. I think having incident response procedures is absolutely critical. So, from a resiliency perspective, it's not just a matter of whether or not the ransomware attacks or other incidents will take place. It's a matter of when they'll take place and how you'll react to those organizationally to restore and maintain business continuity. And then I would say, cyber hygiene, what I call cyber health and hygiene, which largely focuses on best practices. So making sure you're doing things like patch and vulnerability management, whitelisting, network segmentation, all of those best practices that you should be following, I think, are also key to making sure that you have the right posture to not only detect these things, but respond to them proactively, in real time, and then reactively from a resiliency continuity perspective around the SOPs per se, and making sure you have the right skill sets as well. But I would say the most critical success factor from a restoring a known good point would be a sound data protection strategy and having a good backups to support that.
And I appreciate this is a pretty big question, but for businesses or business leaders listening all over the world, what should they do if their organization is a victim of a ransomware attack? Because is there a best practice of what they should be doing?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, it's important to assess your high value assets, right? I think knowing where your systems, your applications, your services, where they live, knowing the corresponding data, having that mapping, knowing how that data impacts your various workflows, whether those workflows are business workflows for internal use cases or their workflows for external customers, knowing what the impact is. I think routinely testing your backups to ensure that you are able to restore those backups and operate off those backups. So not just waiting for the incident to take place, but actually proactively putting those things to the test. I think leveraging other environments such as the public cloud when it comes to disaster recovery and business continuity, I think is incredibly important. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to ransomware. And then finally, I would say a lot of organizations, from my experience, do have a lot of plans that are on paper. So they may have business continuity plans, they may have disaster recovery plans, for either for regulatory reasons or compliance reasons. But I think making sure that those plans actually reflect reality in the event that you are faced with an incident and you have to respond to an incident is absolutely key. And my earlier comment about, tabletop exercises or putting those plans to the test, I think helps you reconcile kind of conceptual and practical dealings. So I think those would be key elements on how to deal with these ransomware attacks.
I've had countless emails from listeners over the last few weeks talking about their fears and concerns around job security, while also seeing their interest rates on their savings drop considerably. And as a result, many are beginning to look at how they can invest in their future in an uncertain time. Could digital assets be the answer? Now, you might remember that I spoke to Blake Hutchinson, CEO at Flipper, on episode 1194 about how to buy digital assets and websites. In a nutshell, Flipper is a marketplace that you can buy and sell websites, stores, and digital real estate that are just ready to go. So if you do have dreams of running your own successful online business, or perhaps you're looking to exit your existing online business, my friends at Flipper can help you buy and sell. So if you're interested and want to find out more, please visit flipper.com/techtalks. That's FLIPPA.com/techtalks for a free consultation and also 50% off all fees. But now, back to the interview. And one of the things I love doing on this podcast is exploring myths around any topics that we discuss. And I think there are many myths around ransomware, especially, I mean, you mentioned a couple there that I think a lot of people just rely heavily on backups and disaster recovery, but that's just not going to be enough. But are there any myths that you can finally lay to rest today on ransomware?
Yeah, I think you definitely nailed a couple that I talked about. And I think this whole notion of that, you will, there's a way to kind of have a bulletproof environment when it comes to ransomware attacks is probably a myth. Education, training, and awareness is absolutely critical. We have various users in these organizations. They have various levels of savvy and training when it comes to cybersecurity, overall technology usage. So I would say being, being very direct and very transparent with the notion of that, it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when you'll be dealt with an attack. No matter how sophisticated or effective your countermeasures are, no matter how elegant your security architecture may be, we see that adversaries are only getting better as time goes by. Access to these malicious tools is even getting easier. So it's the threat landscape will continue evolving. So I think just to kind of one myth that I would like to bust is that you certainly want to make sure you have the right level of maturity and the right level of preparedness when it comes to ransomware, but you don't want to be in this false mindset that you will be able to you'll have a bulletproof ransomware proof environment if you do certain things.
Fantastic advice. And something else that really stood out for me when I was researching you and wanted to get you on this podcast is the mission at Cohesity to radically simplify our organizations managing their data and almost unlocking limitless value. But is that something you can expand on as well, your mission at Cohesity?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, our mission really is to redefine data management. And what we're seeing is that in the over the last decade, there's been a lot of innovation. There's been a lot of optionality. So we talk a lot about the public cloud. We talk about SaaS. But large enterprise organizations or large government agencies are still very much dealing with a predicament where they're shifting towards these new next generation technologies and they're trying to modernize, but they also have a large portfolio of technical debt, legacy on-prem assets, et cetera. So, while the pace of innovation, the pace of change is so fast, it's hard to forecast and predict what will be best to breed tomorrow when it comes to the tooling, the plumbing, and stitching. But I think we have overwhelming consensus that the data layer or the data is really our strategic asset that we need to focus on, whether you're in government, whether you're in private sector, for competitive differentiation and what have you, we say data is the new oil. So as we think about these environments, as we think about leveraging this innovation and this optionality, you want to make sure you have the most efficient approach to managing data. Data will continue growing. I think we can attest to that in our personal lives. Just the volume of data continues to grow at a rapid pace. So as we think about, whatever a model you decide to choose based on your business requirements and your business priorities, whether that's the cloud, whether that's managed service provider, colo, on-premise, remote site, branch office, we really want to give you the ability to manage that entire data fabric in a common unified fashion, which is secure, which gives you the leanest footprint of the data and the greatest access to that data. What we often find is what we've coined as mass data fragmentation, that as organizations are standing up new environments and new applications and new services in these various paradigms, they continue creating stovepipes, they continue introducing duplication, and continue feeding this whole notion of fragmentation where you have data everywhere. The data is being serviced by a series of point solutions. It's incredibly inefficient because data has to be copied, which can be expensive. And largely that data is what we call dark data, which Gartner also talks about, meaning we collect a lot of data, but if that data is not available for analysis and utilization, then the data is really not providing the value that it should be. So that we pretty much tackle that entire threefold problem of mass data fragmentation and how we give you that platform, a software-defined, hardware-agnostic platform that can help you across all of those environments to really go from aspirational to operational in this hybrid multi-cloud ecosystem.
And despite all the lockdowns and uncertainty at the moment, I know you guys have had an incredibly busy year, but is there anything else you can share with us today about the road ahead and things that really make you more positive and excited about the future?
Yeah. I think COVID is certainly, forcing organizations to rethink the way we do business in a positive way. I think for a long time, technology has been talked about as an enabler for the business versus a cost center or overhead. I think it's really now starting to resonate the value that technology can provide and the value that technology really brings to the table, as with no matter which industry or vertical we're in. And to that point, as there's budget pressures, as business is impacted due to COVID, I think I would just add that looking at economically efficient architectures for your IT portfolio are key. I think those economically efficient architectures like Cohesity with a platform focus give you the ability to reduce cost, reduce architectural complexity, gives you access to the cloud, and also reduces your management burden and your management overhead, as well as managing skill sets in a more efficient way. So as organizations are thinking about cost reductions and technology innovation, I think this is also a ripe time to take a closer look and perform that inspection on how you can how you can optimize and become better on all of those fronts.
Couldn't agree more. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of people listening wanting to explore this area too. And for anyone that wants to find out more information or follow the work that you're doing, what's the best way of finding you online and equally contacting your team if they need to?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. First name is Steve. Last name is Grewal. That's spelled Grewal. You can also email me at sgrewal@cohesity.com. Either one of those options, I'll make sure I take your message and respond, and look forward to engaging with any questions and follow-ups that may come from your audience.
Well, I think as the global pandemic puts this enormous financial strain on many private and public sector organisations, I think now more than ever, it's important for organisations to know what to do in case of a successful ransomware attack. It feels unthinkable, but the likelihood of it happening is increasing all the time. It's such a timely message, and I hope it will deliver a lot of value to people listening. But more than anything, Steve, big thank you for taking the time to come on here and share that with me today.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for having me, and thank you to your listeners. Look forward to engaging further.
I think ransomware is such an important topic, and there are so many myths and information out there at the moment that it's crucial that we have conversations like this. But I'm conscious as well, I don't want it just to be my opinions and the guests sharing their opinions and experiences, because I know you're all listening in 165 countries, and you're going to have your own unique insights and experiences and best practices and things that you wouldn't do again. So for those reasons, at the end of every episode, I always like to open my door and say, please, let me know your thoughts. So for those reasons alone, my email address is techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. I'm nice and easy to find. You find all my social channels on there. If you'd sooner just send me a direct message on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is, you can do that too. So keep those messages coming in. I hope you found today's episode as valuable as I did. And I'll return again tomorrow with another guest and another topic. But no spoilers here on this episode. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.